Small Town Hospital, Big Time Hauntings Part 2. This is the continuation of my first story about the small town hospital I work at in upstate New York. It has several ghosts and spirits locked away in its many departments. If you have not read it yet, I suggest you to do so. It contains some pretty wild going-ons, but to us who work there, it is just another day in the life of a hospital worker. So after a while, we learn not to draw too much attention to these happenings. That it doesn't mean that we can forget either. In the first installment, we cover the history of the hospital and the land on which it sets, battlegrounds, farm settlements, and plenty of sickness and death, and then focused on the second floor, home to many offices, the medical records department, the sleep center, and the pediatrics unit, as well as a former medical and surgical unit. Second floor is considered to be one of the most active and creepiest, especially at night, in which is the shift I work. I know many places do seem eerie in the dark, especially when you do not know what is around the corner. Everything is quiet, and you know nobody is around sometimes but yourself. But when a place is extremely haunted, it does admittedly have an entirely different feeling to the atmosphere, and adds an extra sense of uneasiness for most people. For me, it can be exciting. But I have also learned the hard way that it pays to learn how to sense the energies around you and tread carefully, or curiosity can kill the cat. What do I mean by that? Well, I just wanted to add a quick story to the second floor before we move on, as I had left it out of my previous installment. And I feel it importantly not only to the story, but also as a warning to anybody who not only likes to read about the paranormal, but actually go and investigate it as well, lest they wind up in trouble, like I did. As previously mentioned, I had said the medical records department on the second floor was probably the most haunted spot on the second floor. My wife, a psychic, healer, and metaphysical researcher, actually performed a crystal dosing experiment down there one night on her own because she had suspicions of demonic activity. Her crystals revealed the truth to her, and there was indeed a demon present in that department. Previous to this taking place, however, she revealed to me in a later discussion that one night she was headed to the medical records department when outside the department door hangs a few old-time pictures of past doctors that have worked in the hospital. One of them is an old black and white photo, quite large and front and center among the photos, being the one that usually attracts your eye first. This demon purposely in the department learned to recognize her presence. Demons, while not being generally friendly in the first place, tend to grow angered or cower in her presence, depending on the demon, due to her physical and cleansing abilities to sense them and her knowledge on how to fight them. And they would usually wait for her and try to intimidate her away from it. But when you have a job to do, you have to do it, regardless of what remains to be seen. It was on her approach to the door to the medical records that her eyes focused on the picture of that one doctor whom she noticed did not appear as it normally did, but rather had crimson eyes in black of his normal, stern black and white ones. Nothing else down this way was reflecting any light off the glass of the frame. It was rather dark, and no red lights were anywhere nearby, so this anomaly was unmistakable, a warning. She still does not like to go near that portrait until this day. As for my own personal experience with this entity, I never paid it any mind, even when my wife warned me to do so. No such beings generally seem to bother me, as I naturally project an aura of confidence and willfulness around me, which protects me. However, in the world of the extrasensory, there is a practice called grounding yourself, something that I was not aware of so generally I didn't bear it mind at any point. Much like a grounding prog on an electrical plug protects the user from electrical shock, grounding your spirit and energy protects from any malicious energies that may try to attack you. This particular practice was lost on me, so one night while I was there, I went poking around parts of the medical records department I usually do not look in. Not to go snooping, of course. I am a healthcare professional, but for paranormal snooping purposes, to see what I turned up. A little more than I bargained for was my answer, because I went all around the part where the demon reportedly frequents, and when I left the department, I noticed I felt different. The ghost I always noted that travels in a loop from the sleep center doors to the elevators had a different feeling about it, as if it were ushering me out to move, to get away, and almost felt like it was going to pass me, which it never does. But it normally feels like a little friend that keeps a slower pace behind me and just escorts me down the hall. I was a little unnerved by the energies I was giving off, almost like it was fearful of me, but at the same time was trying to protect me by making me hightail it out of there. Later that night, I had a dream, which seemed a little ridiculous at first until something showed up. It was something that stuck with me for several days. A face in the corner of a room, large, sharp teeth, fierce eyes, and an evil smile. Just a strange bad dream, right? Well, in the subsequent days, I could not shake that image out of my brain no matter what. It kept coming back to haunt me, and I began to feel restless and drained of energy. I told my wife what I had done and about the dream and the face, so she asked the psychic, who was older and had more experience under her belt, to help me. She did a psychic reading on me and sensed that I had an attachment, a spirit or entity that had latched onto your energy and is following you wherever you go. So she gave my wife and I some instructions on how to cleanse and rid myself and our home of it, and how to make sure it did not happen again. After we did what she asked of us, it was like an instant uplifting feeling, and I felt suddenly lighter and like I had been sick and just got over it. And nothing had bothered me again down in that department. But a word of caution for those who dare tangle with such entities: ground yourself, use caution, and understand the risk before you make your decision. Well, enough about the second floor. Move downstairs to the first floor and you have a variety of areas, from the lobby and the switchboard operator to the registration department, the operating room, the emergency room, an intensive care unit, the laboratory, the diagnostic imaging unit, the nursing administration office, and many other small places. Do not worry. The stories I have to offer will not encompass all of these areas, mainly because many I do not spend a lot of time in, nor do others I work with. But I certainly do have a few stories worth telling, as do some of my coworkers. Needless to say, in such an old hospital, many old-style apparitions have been spotted. I have worked with 2 nurses that have been gifted with the ability to see such phenomenons, both of who have spotted these old spirits on the first floor. One nurse was down at the end of the hallway near the nursing administration office one night and saw 3 men walking down the hallway, full-figured, yet transparent, dressed in clothing that could have been the early 20th century, walking down the hallway towards her, talking to each other, completely unaware of her presence. As they approached her, she stood aside to allow them to pass, and eventually, they turned a corner and disappeared. For this woman, visions such as these were commonplace, as she used to tell us frequent stories of the things she would see. But this was the one I remembered from the first floor. Another nurse who was adept at noticing full-bodied apparitions was standing near the lobby one night, at the base of the stairwell, talking with the nursing supervisor, when suddenly an older woman dressed in clothing certainly not of this era came walking up out of nowhere and passed right in between the two of them without saying excuse me or even looking at them. Now this nurse, who was enveloped in her conversation that did not pay too much attention to this woman, gave her a look as if to say how rude, and she said aloud, "Oops, excuse me." But this older woman did not look at her, just turned the corner and disappeared. Imagine the nurse's surprise when the nursing supervisor gave her a confused look and stopped talking to ask her, "What do you mean? Excuse me?" The nurse looked at her and asked, "You didn't just see that woman walk directly in between us without saying a word?" Well, as a matter of fact, she had not seen that woman, which surprised the nurse, and she always remembered that experience and told it often when the subject came up. From what I know, the only other place on this floor that I have stories is the emergency room, primarily because my wife, the psychic, works there on the overnight shift. To wrap this up, there are only two I really can recall worth the telling. Being in a hospital, there is no shortage of spirits, and anybody who has been involved with a highly active place in the past can say that some of them can be quite mischievous, like touching people randomly and banging things around. One such ghost has scared my wife on 2 occasions right at her desk. The first time she was sitting, minding her own business, when suddenly it felt as if someone slapped their right hand down on her shoulder. It made her jump and spin around, and to her surprise, nobody was behind her at all. Another time, she was sitting at her desk again when an unseen force made such a loud ruckus by slamming down on her desk abruptly, and it shook her up a bit. Oddly enough, for as loud as she claimed it had been, nobody else nearby heard the slamming noise. As a matter of fact, the only spirit in that area that has not frightened her was the apparition of an old woman, who was actually not full body, but actually just the head and upper torso, transparent and floating in midair. It appeared at the opposite end of the nurse's station, floating right down the aisle, unaware of anyone else, right in front of my wife's desk, and disappeared into a wall. Talk about spooky. Well, it is about time to end this extensive segment of the tale, and I thank you all for following yet again. Please feel free to comment and look out in the coming days for the 3rd and final installment to this series. Old Children's Hospital. In early 2000, my mother's boyfriend had moved into a recently converted apartments that were originally a children's hospital built in the 1800s. So, my mom and I went over to help him unpack and set up. I was around 6 at the time, so I just went where she went. It was all new on the inside and out, but it still felt and looked a bit like a hospital. I remember the hallways were long, white, and very clinically clean. When we got to his flat, it seemed as though they kept all the original hospital rooms, because it was no bigger than the ones I'd been to. You could fit 4 beds on each side, and all the medical equipment that accompanies them. I recall it always being rather cold at his place, even without the air conditioning on, and this is in Australia, so I wasn't used to that. We stayed there with him on the first night, and I awoke to this horrible blood-curdling scream that seemed to echo through the entire building. I leaped out of bed and went looking for my mom, but her and her boyfriend were already listening to it. She stayed with me until I fell asleep and convinced me it must have been one of their new tenants. The next day they found out that he was one of the first people to move into that part of the apartment blocks. The next day we stayed over, he and my mom went to get us lunch and left me there for a couple minutes on my own. I was hanging upside down off the sofa, as kids do, and I remember looking under the couch, which was a couple inches off the ground, when I saw these 2 extremely pale bare feet stepped down as if they were getting off of a bed or a really high chair. For a split second, I thought, yay, they're back. But then I realized that if my mother was back, she would have called for me as soon as she came in. And then I noticed that the feet were quite small and far too white to be hers. So I just froze and watched as they walked off. And then I got up and looked around, but no one was there. After he moved out, we found out that he was actually living in what would have been the children's burn ward. The abandoned hospital. This is my first of hopefully many submissions. If you have any questions, please feel free to inquire. For legal purposes, I cannot disclose the exact location of my experiences, as the penalties for trespassing in said locations are quite severe. I have taken multiple people there, and in my experience, it is often scarier seeing red and blue police lights than it is to witness the paranormal. I have multiple photos of the location and will share some of them with anyone who is genuinely interested in the location and my experiences. As they are my personal work and livelihood, I sell my prints and artwork. I am not posting them with this because I don't need them ending up all over the internet. But as I said, if you're interested in anything written, ask me at my email. Over the course of my life, I have acquired a wealth of information regarding the paranormal. Growing up in a 26-room, 200-plus-year-old Victorian home, my experiences with the paranormal started at an early age, and it has been an interest of mine since childhood. I am now an artist in multiple mediums, and photography is a very large part of my life. Anyways, let me cut to the chase and get to the good stuff. There is a series of abandoned mental health facilities near where I live in upstate New York. I have snuck into, photographed, and explored the majority of them, with the exception of the more modern buildings that are sealed off, with metal bars and chains. One building in particular still gives occasional nightmares to this day. The building is a 3-story brick construction that has fallen victim to time lapse and Mother Nature. The floors are rotten, roofs partially collapsed. The building is more or less a death trap if you aren't careful. Which brings me to the first 2 stories I am sharing today. My friend and I were headed up the road leading to the buildings one early evening in June of 2009 when we passed a group of college kids. A rather common sight, considering there was a community college relatively close. We were a bit irritated by this and hoped there would be no one inside to disturb our photo shoot. We entered the building and all seemed quiet, so we began unpacking our equipment. After setting up our artificial lighting and snapping a few test photographs of our setting, we heard some muffled laughter and talking from somewhere else. We brushed it off as nothing and merely assumed it was those college kids in the building who hopefully would not be disturbing us. A few minutes later, we heard a loud crash, followed by a girl screaming. I immediately assumed for the worst and said, "Oh fuck, I think someone fell through the floor." I have first aid training and have worked search and rescue before, so after a quick assessment of the situation, my friend and I set off into the building together. We kept waiting to hear the rest of the people and wondered why the hell no one was helping this girl who was crying out from somewhere within the building. The basement revealed nothing, and the first floor was empty. We went through the second floor, occasionally shouting to the girl that we were going to help her and to stay calm. We kicked down a few rotten wooden doors, pulled back old bed curtains, checked every nook and cranny, and then came to a huge hole in the ceiling. We assumed it was the acoustics of the building that made the girl constantly seem like she was right around the corner from us, and that the sound was traveling from the 3rd floor down through the hole and echoing through the halls. We got upstairs and searched all the rooms until we came to one door that was closed. After trying to nudge it open, it appeared jammed, and the girl sounded as if she was right behind it. So remembering my training, I decided it was time to break the door down. I yelled through the door to the girl and told her to try her best to move away from the door, if she was anywhere near it, because we were going to kick it down. Several kicks would not open the door, so my friend and I decided to do a bit of a running start and ram it down together. The whole time, my friend kept saying, "This doesn't make sense, this doesn't make sense." And I assumed he was confused as I was about why the door just wouldn't break. After getting a running start, I threw my weight into the door, which to my surprise, broke out the frame like a twig. Whatever instinct my friend had during these few short seconds may very well have saved my life. As I hit the door, my friend yelled, "Wait!" and grabbed onto the collar of my shirt. Just as he did, the door flew out several feet and fell 3 stories to the ground with a loud bang. I scrambled away from the ledge with my friend in a total state of shock. The only thing behind the door was the collapsed wing of the building. There was no girl, no more shouting, nothing, besides the sounds of my heart beating in my ears. I later learned that my friend was saying that it didn't make sense because he was thinking of the layout of the building and was certain that behind that door was exactly what existed: the collapsed part of the building. Had he not grabbed me, I would have fallen with the door 3 stories to the pile of rubble from the collapsed floors beneath me. After listening and shouting a few more times, my friend and I left the building quickly, having decided there were no people inside other than ourselves. My second story involves the same building. I will make it as short as possible since by now you already have an idea of the building if you've read this far. One afternoon around mid-July, my friend and I were back in the building taking photos. It was daylight and very much less frightening, with so much sunlight coming through all the broken windows. We were on the 3rd floor when we heard what sounded like someone slam a door or slam a desk onto the ground, followed by heavy footsteps with a considerable amount of noise. We immediately assumed it was the security guards trying to scare us out of hiding, so we snuck down to the 2nd floor to try and figure out a way past them out the building, which only has one entrance that is not blocked off. As we were about to turn a corner into a hallway, we heard footsteps coming from that direction, so we turned into the nearest room and hid in a closet. The closet had only half of a broken door and about 3 feet of an angle. You could not see just staring at the closet from the room. We pressed ourselves flat against the wall and hid in the little angle, hoping no one would stick their head in the closet and turn to see us. The footsteps grew closer and soon entered the room we were hiding in. They crossed the room, stopped, and soon we heard the metal bed frame creaking, as if someone sat down on it. We stayed as still as possible for nearly 30 minutes when finally we heard footsteps leave the room and head down the hallway and down the stairs. We quickly rushed to the room above the entrance to look at the window and see no one left the building. We waited for 2 to 3 hours, and as soon as it started to get dark, we decided to chance ourselves getting arrested and exit the building. There was nobody. No security guard. No one ever left the building. We walked downstairs, took a quick look around, and left the building the way we came in. Once again, completely confused and quite uneasy about the situation. Anyways, these are my stories for now. I hope some of you enjoyed them. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. I photographed many abandoned buildings, and this is by far one of the strangest I've been in. I have a few more stories to share, and We'll most likely submit them as soon as possible if anyone is interested. Best wishes and safe travels to all of you, especially those of you like me who enjoy exploring the locations forgotten by time.